Sit in comfortable position. Keep your spine erect, chin away from your chest. Eyes gently closed, shift your awareness to Jyotishmati. Let's begin today's session with the opening prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let's offer our salutations to Sage Patanjali. Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacha Malam Shariram Cha Vaidyakena Vyopakarotam Pravaram Muninam Patanjalim Pranjaliranatosmi. Welcome all for today's session. So what we wanted to do today is continue the study of the Yoga Sutra. So far we covered the first 4 limbs, which are the Yama and Niyama, which are the external conduct and the self-conduct. And then we focused on asana and the pranayama. So what we're going to do today is we're going to cover the last limb in the Ashtvangani, which is about Pratyahara, which is about the withdrawal from the sensory perception. And that concludes the Bahiranga sadhana. So all the outward practices. And then we'll also begin into the Antaranga sadhana, which is about the dharana. And in fact, Patanjali, what he does is he actually, after the first 5 limbs, he actually takes a chapter break. He moves on to the Vibhuti Pada. So he believes that the Antaranga sadhana needs to be started fresh. But what we do is depending on the time, I think we should probably be able to finish Pratyahara relatively quickly, and then if that is, then we'll also get started on the dharana, which is the first the limb of the Antaranga sadhana. So before we begin, are there any questions, comments, thoughts?
Sriniji, I saw your video on the pure introduction. Finally, I was able to watch that. Excellent introduction. Great job in the, what do you call, the PowerPoint, and how it flowed through the whole. It was in a nutshell, I could understand what pure stands for, basically.
I see. Oh, that's so fantastic, actually. That is so brilliant. I think, even their story of the inspiring team of 5, how they came together. And every time I hear their story, it's truly, truly inspiring. I mean, these are, typically what we see ourselves, right? People, most of them are housewives. In fact, some of them, they need their husband to book their flight tickets, but the way they were able to resonate with the cause and starting this movement. And I got connected to pure. I mean, there is another, story that I will also tell it a little bit later time. I was actually inspired by this movie, The Lion. It was Nicole Kidman's movie.
Oh, yeah. I don't. Okay, yeah, I've seen that movie. It's pretty good.
That movie, there was one line that Nicole Kidman says when I think Dave asked him, it's just like, "Mom, why didn't you have your own kids? You would have spared all this trouble." And she says, like, "We could have, but we chose not to," or something like that. Right? And then the journey happened, but it's truly inspiring what this team is able to do. And after my thing, I don't know if you gotten a chance to watch the entire video where Upasana was also there. Upasana commented.
Yeah, I saw the entire video, and I like how she spoke, and yeah,
excellent.
I've seen her interview a couple of times.
That's fantastic. But thank you so much for that comment. So let's move on to the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Let me share my screen. So what we have done is, as we said earlier, so we covered the first 4 limbs, the Yama, Niyama, Asana, and Pranayama. And then let's move on to the 5th limb, which is Pratyahara. Pratyahara very simply means it's, in fact, it's about fasting, or it's about withdrawing ourselves or reducing our consumption. Ahara is consumption. I mean, it's not just the food, consumption through all our senses. And pratyahara is reversing the process of consumption. So this is actually one of the most important things that we need to do to be able to prepare ourselves for the antaranga sadhana, to be able to move into the meditation and samadhi and so on and so forth. And sometimes what I would actually joke around this whole thing is, I think I wrote a small blog about this, which is like, if I look at it as ahara, and then excessive consumption is atyahara, and then the reduced consumption is pratyahara, or reversing that consumption. I think what's happening is, I think in the world, particularly in today's world of where we are constantly being stimulated by our senses, we are bombarded with excessive consumption. In fact, atyahara. In fact, if I were to project this, all our economic models are also built based on consumerism. In fact, our health of an economy is measured by the consumer spending index. If there is more consumerism, that means that economy is considered very good. So in other words, we kind of got distorted from what is our true well-being for ourselves and for our own the communities or the societies or the nations, where our perceived well-being is measured by how much we consume, and we are seeing the ill effects of that. In fact, the real equanimity or the well-being is going to come when we actually move into the other direction, which is actually the pratyahara. And there is one analogy that somebody actually, when we were in some discussion, we were actually talking about. Apparently, the God designed this stomach and then the lungs, right? What God actually said is, what we need to consume, particularly for the food, is something that we need to be able to fit in our folded palms. That's all we need to consume. And then, but for the lungs, we need to consume about 200%. But I think what we are doing is, in the atyahara, we are actually consuming like making the stomach like a pot belly, and then but we only fill our lungs about 20%. So we are completely reversing how God or the divine intents us to function. So I think this is a critical dimension of yogic practice. That we need to do that. And the other dimension of this is, in fact, a lot of people actually believe that fasting is a critical element for our overall well-being. So no matter what faith that we take, everybody takes this fasting as an important piece of their practices, whether you're talking about Islam or Christianity, other practices, they all incorporate it somehow, this pratyahara fasting as a critical element of their practices. So how did Patanjali define pratyahara? Pratyahara is the way it goes something like this, which is like swavishaya asamprayoge. Samprayoga means perceiving. Asamprayoga means which is like not able to perceive or getting disconnected from the perception. Swavishaya asamprayoge chittasya swarupe. Swarupe is actually the real sense of the whatever is object. Swarupe anukara means follow. Swarupe anukara indriyanam are the sensory objects. The indriyanam pratyahara. So the way we parse this is, which is swavishaya. Vishaya is the object of the perception. Swavishaya asamprayogaha, when you are getting disconnected or detached from the objects of the perception, and not able to follow that through. Whatever is the object that is being perceived by your senses, when you are not able to, chitta means your mind. When your mind is disconnected from the object of perception, and not able to follow that through, not able to, if there is an image that is getting projected into your mind, if the mind basically separates itself from processing that image, right? Processing from that image instead of following that through and then processing that image and then presenting that image to your drashtuhu, swarupe, to be able to project it. When your mind stops processing these sensory perceptions, I think that is what is known as pratyahara. So this is a beautiful thing. In fact, in Bhagavad Gita, I think there is a metaphor. What it actually says is just like how a tortoise gradually withdraws its limbs from within, to limbs, to within, we need to be able to operate like a tortoise to be able to have that full control over our sensory organs. So that is what is pratyahara. And if you actually go look deeper into it, the sensory objects, the way it actually works is there are two elements. One is Karmendriyas, which is like, the organs that actually do the action, which is like, which is actually doing any one of the sensory actions. And then the gyanendriyas are the things that actually perceive, create an element of perception within your chitta, within your mind, right? So when we are talking about the pratyahara, we are not limiting it to just the external perception or the karmendriyas. What it means is, as an example, you can just close your eyes, and what you're doing is you're actually shut that the karmendriya. You stop the act of seeing, but your mind can still see within the images that it already has. So that means you haven't still actually done the pratyahara yourself completely, because you still have it. Similarly, you may not actually eat anything, right? You may stop eating laddu, or like what Savitaji and we were talking in the last class, which is about the coffee, or coffee without sugar. But if you shut the coffee, but your mind is still clinging on to that image or the perception of the taste of a sugar or the taste of a coffee, you still have not mastered the pratyahara. So what it actually means is, that's why there is a dimensions of two elements in this Yoga Sutra. One is the Vishaya Samprayoge, the Vishaya, which is like the external objects, and then also to be able to Swarupe Anukarha, to not able to follow through that image or the perception of the image, is known as the act of pratyahara. So let me stop here. Does this make sense? The full mastery of the pratyahara, it's about having control over both external perception but also the internal perception, karmendriyam and gyanendriyam.
Yes.
Yes. So anything that anybody would want to add to this? Sunilji, anything from your neurology department?
No, Ji, I think that's... Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Savitaji. Go ahead.
No, you started. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the sensory input, I think we are getting throughout the day-to-day life, essentially it distorts our thinking. So shutting down our phones, stopping, not having any television in bedrooms, just like not even putting any music, just for 1 hour and sitting quiet. I think that probably refreshes the mind much more. But right now we don't have that much ability. Like a lot of times, when we are sitting idle, we are watching like computer, or watching television, or watching cell phone. I think that constantly bombards us with sensory input, and we can't focus because of that sensory input. I think that fasting, probably that's what he's referring to, the shutting our cell phones, no book, no television, no cell phone, just keep quiet sitting.
It's a fantastic insight. In fact, we call this, right? We are being bombarded by WMDs, weapons of mass distraction. From the phones and social media. In fact, that phrase is so genuinely true. Weapons of mass distraction, and I think that's what, unlike our generation, I feel sorry for our kids. The generation and so on and so forth, where they have so many modes of the distraction. So unless and until they build this muscle of pratyahara to be able to have the full control over their sensory organs or the sensory perceptions, their ability to succeed. In fact, forget about succeed. They will actually, eventually what happens, what Patanjali basically do is, when you actually bombard yourself with all these sensory perceptions, constantly doing it, your actually sensory perceptions loses its power. And in fact, you need a higher stimulation. You need higher stimulation. So the subtlety of the real power of the ekagrata, the heightened power of that sensation, you'll actually diminish their power. I mean, you can see that, right? Kids that watch TV all the time, they get glasses. And if you're constantly bombarding yourself with music, your hearing gets suppressed.
And kids are suffering from this ADD, attention deficit disorders, and all those things. Because of this lack of attention is because they are bombarded with this sensory inputs all the time. Sound, light, even light is a sensory input. Like, shutting down light. I generally say, having a room in the house, a corner, no light, no sound, nice, probably not even a smell, but if possible, a pleasant light smell. Close the eyes, sit down for half an hour. I think that will refresh the mind. It's like exercise to the mind, like asanas being exercise to the body.
I think what you said is there. And then, I'll actually refer to one other, Yoga Sutra we've actually covered before, which is Vishayavativa Pravrittirutpanna Manasa Nibandhanaha. What it actually says is, one of the, particularly those people that are actually having ADHD type issues, and that is because of this overindulgence on this pratyahara. You're constantly letting your mind process all this, be processing all these stimulations, both internal and external. So your senses actually lose their power, but at the same time, you're also in the scattered mind. Like what we covered this stuff, right? A scattered mind is a mind that is in, when your mind is in pieces, you are never in peace. So you don't have concentration. What Patanjali said is, you can actually use the sensory to actually bring concentration back. But what he says is, for that, he basically said, only focus on one sense at a time. Vishayavativa pravrittirutpanna. So shut down all the other senses. Perhaps you only focus on hearing. You only amplify touch, or you only amplify one. And that way, but go approach one-pointedness with that sensory thing. So that was also one strategy that Patanjali described in chapter 1 in Samadhipada as part of one of the 9 upayas to overcome obstacles in the practice. But this one is very much about, the more you use your sensory perceptions and you bombard them, what happens is those sensory perceptions also lose their power. And then the ultimate effect is you also get into ADHD, kind of stuff. I mean, I think, it feels so sad. Like more and more people are having hearing issues, seeing issues. They cannot even taste something because they're always stimulating with more spicy and more things. So they lose the subtleties, the real power of the sensory. They're actually getting lost. Saptaji, I think, you had something to say.
This is something I read somewhere. It's called Pancha Pratyahara. Pancha Pratyahara is in relation to the 5 elements, which is earth, water, fire, air, and ether. So anything with, when earth is intermittent fasting, you basically do intermittent fasting. And with water is you consume alkaline water, or pure water as much as possible. And with fire, you do sweating exercise. You sweat the heat or body by exercising. And with the air is you do kumbhak or pranayama, the air balance here. And with the ether is meditation, basically. So this is Pancha Pratyahara, somewhere I had read. So I just wanted to share that.
Wow, that's a beautiful thing. If you have any infographic of that, I think, we should probably use that.
I have to create something. I just read. Yeah, maybe you can create one.
This is like,
You're good at infographic. I'm not.
The homework is only, can be given out, not taken in, right? But
okay. I'll take up that challenge. Yeah, sure.
Excellent. Thank you. So this is another kind of an infographic that I just picked up from one of the articles. I mean, this also kind of processes how we, the people in the Sanatana Dharma, in the yogic system, how we look at our mind, right? The mind is there is this external sensory perceptions, the indriyas, and then we have many faculties within the mind. Like, the mind is one that is taking that image. And then there is ahankara, buddhi, ahankara, which is like what is the one that is adding a dimension to it, which is like, what it actually means, the intellect behind that image. And then the next faculty is the asmita. Asmita is like, the me, my, what's in it for me kind of that chatter, right? Which is like, the individuality or the ego. So we actually, whatever the senses present into it, there is all this additional contextual enrichment. No, sorry, forget about the enrichment, what the word is for. The contextual overloading or contextual tagging, that's what our mind does. And then that is what gets presented to drishta is, okay, now this biryani is something that is there, and then this biryani with whatever the tamasic food that is there is good, and then we got whatever, right? And finally it creates some kind of a clinging or the desire, and then you enjoy it. And then depending upon the thing, then it actually creates impressions, and then we actually do it. What the pratyahara is to be able to transcend this whole thing. There's to be able to transcend this entire process, and then not able to even you can actually shut down this external perception if you want, like what Sunilji said, you can sit in the room, or like what Savita just said, there are all these kriyas starting from intermittent fasting to meditation to purify yourself, or to practice pratyahara across the 5 different dimensions. And that is one dimension. And then the other one is to be able to then eventually to be able to prepare yourself to connect with the self, because the self that is there within us, it doesn't have any one of it's beyond touch, it's beyond smell, it is beyond any one of the sensory perceptions. In fact, if you look at the Nirvana Shatakam, the first thing that it actually says, as Adi Shankara says, is Mano Buddhi Ahankara Chitta Ninaham Nacha Shrotra Jikhve Nacha Grana Netre Nacha Vyoma Bhumi Na Tejo Na Vayu. I mean, this is a fascinating thing. I mean, this entire Nirvana Shatakam is so fantastic. And what it basically says, like, and I'm not the mind, I'm not the intellect, I'm not the ego or asmita bhavam, and I'm not any one of this memory. And then I'm not the strotra, I'm not the taste, I'm not the grana, which is the touch, and I'm not the seeing, and I'm also not any one of these the space, ether, or any one of these panchabhutas, right? But who am I? Who am I is, it is like, I'm something that is Satchitananda, which is like the pure eternal bliss, or the pure consciousness and the bliss, which is what we refer to as the Shiva. Shiva is that the space between the molecules, or the unmanifested thing, right? That is the Shiva. So this pratyahara is to be able to, is the process to be able to get there. And the Nirvana Shatakam actually is the process on how we can actually get there. So, and then what Patanjali says is, one of the benefits of the pratyahara, which is like, tatah parama vashendriyanam. By practicing this fasting, you actually develop the mastery, the full control over your indriyas. And in fact, what they say is, right, why do you need to do fasting? Fasting actually helps your digestion, and it actually makes your body stronger, right? And when you more practice closing your eyes, and it actually strengthens, some of your the vision, or the more you use them less, and go deeper, their sense of sensibilities, will actually only improve, just like the tortoise. And one of the practices that we do in the yoga is Shenmukh Mudra. Shenmukh Mudra is one of the things that we actually do to practice pratyahara, where you literally close everything, from ears, nose, and the eyes, and we do the Shenmukh Mudra. Did anybody try any of the Shenmukh Mudra before? Which is like, something, I think, what they,
it's like a Brahmari.
Yeah, but it's actually not even Brahmari. You have to close your eyes, and then nostrils, and the mouth, and something like this. So Brahmari is only this.
I haven't tried.
Yeah, no, I tried that. Yeah.
So this is, you have to put this, Surviji, did you try this?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, it's just like there is a.
I mean, I was not able to recall the name, but I can see this thing. I have done it, and yes.
Yeah, it was like something like you use all these 5 fingers to cover the 5 senses, and then
Yes.
you go inward, and then there are some postures that you can practice in the Shenmukh Mudra, and that is way to. And what you do is you actually take a full deep breath, and then close all these things, and then you stay in that posture for however long that you actually do, and then you shift your eye gaze to the Ajna chakra, or one of the chakras that you have, and then you basically stay in that posture for however long that you have. That is one of the processes that we use in the yogic system. That's one of the techniques. But other way is like what Savitaji that you have done. I think the fasting is actually something that we recommend once at least every week. Is something that actually brings a lot more control. So initially it looks rather tapas, put yourself out of the comfort zone. But eventually what happens is you become much more harmonious. And I mean, nowadays I'm not doing the fasting, but I remember in 2018, after I did my 15-day yoga training camp, and there they actually insist that you have to do fasting every Saturday, and fasting, and there is a process for that. When you do the fasting, what used to be so fantastic was after the 32 hours or whatever the time that you do the fasting, if you do yoga after that, you have so much energy. I mean, I found it very counterintuitive, but it made so much sense. And you feel like you don't have energy, but after you do the fasting, and when you do the morning yoga practice, you actually feel so lighter. It's almost like you experience the Angalagam, and then you are literally getting that sense of blissfulness in your yoga practice. So that is something that if you practice fasting, I would encourage you to try your yoga practice, sun salutations and after the fasting, and then see if it actually makes any difference for your thing. But of course, the fasting also needs to be done in the right way, where you make sure that you hydrate yourself properly. Otherwise, you get headache and this stuff. There are different schools of thought. Some people say that you do the fasting with, you can take either lemon water and honey. And some people say that, having honey water actually at least keeps your brain in a thing. Some people say that, you should just do noble fasting. In other words, not even the noble fasting, like what people practice at the Ramadan time, but only drink water and other stuff. So if you are actually doing it, but not just limited to the food consumption, but let's all make it an intention to practice pratyahara in all the other sensory things, which is like, whether watching TV or watching the types of things that we are actually doing, like what Sunili said, no sound, no taste, and no touch. If you can actually practice this, then it actually allows us to, number one, get more deeper sensory perceptions. You actually heighten the power of those senses, and you'll also build master. So you're not simply driven by the impressions. But the moment there is a sensation of hunger, you're not driving to the food, right? So that's kind of a quick overview of the Pratyahara.
I do intermittent fasting. I do 1 meal a day, but on the weekends, I like to go and eat outside.
I see. And in your intermittent fasting, is it completely noble in the sense that do you do for like 12 to 16 hours?
Yeah. My first meal of the day is around 1:30, 2 o'clock. That's like my brunch, or like whatever you call lunch. And if I'm really hungry by evening, I'll eat something light. Otherwise, then it goes all the way next day at the same time. So
I actually do the exact same thing. Mine is like 1:32 or sometimes 2:30, 3 o'clock. And but do you drink any lemon water, or you only keep it to just?
I do drink lemon water in the morning, but not with honey, just the
Actually, my colleague, my VP of marketing, Britta, what she does is she thinks that she doesn't want to make sure that there are any calories whatsoever. In fact, apparently there is this collagen pills that she takes, but she realized that apparently has 20 calories. She basically
I think they're more doing keto in the sense she doesn't want her
no.
ketosis disrupted, because any amount of carbs can tip her keto.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ketos.
Yeah, ketosis, because you want to create
ketosis.
To be able to then burn the fat and all the other stuff, right? So I think she's doing that. Whenever she looks, anyway, I don't want to make any comment on it, but that is like she maintains. What I do is exactly like what we do, just like just drink the lemon water and then use coffee or decaf or tea. I think that is my thing. And then my first meal is about 2:30 or 3 o'clock. And then on the dinner usually becomes something like, but I think more and more people are doing that. And then you realize that, right? That one meal is good enough. It creates so much energy actually.
Less stuff in the kitchen to clean for sure.
I see. So we can do a lot more meditation. That's cool. So anybody else?
And I have one addition here. So Pratyahara is very important when it comes to all this dieting stuff, because even I am doing that. But if I end up staying in the living room where the kitchen is during the day, then I will be less doing the Pratyahara because the food is close by or the refrigerator is in front of the eyes. So whenever mind is distracted, so next thing is I want to go grab something to eat. But when I am not downstairs, then I will be more about the Pratyahara, because I cannot see and then I cannot think about eating.
I see.
So
that's an important dimension, but that's exactly what Patanjali was saying, where it's not just about the Karmendriyana, but it's also about the grand mastery or the gyanendriyas, right?
Yeah.
The Sutra, right? Which is like, in fact, perhaps the thing is, I mean, I think even that's what happens, right? If there are food around, particularly.
Srini.
Yeah.
Sorry, were you finished or did I interrupt?
No, go ahead. I think so. Yeah, please go ahead.
I have a rebel question as usual. Why did you say eating once a day is noble fasting? What's so noble about not eating a wholesome meal? Why is it less noble to have 2 meals or 3 meals? I understand this part about restraint and about I completely agree with what you and Sunil were talking about also. Frankly, I used to have incredible concentration. Now I find myself checking Facebook for no reason. Every few minutes, almost like compulsive. So I'm all for restraint and I'm all for shutting down sensory distractions, and I am effectively going to try to turn off, and it really helps. I agree. Sometimes I think it's a big source of distress, even sometimes when you're trying to process things and overcome, this doesn't even allow you. But when it comes to food, every person, I'm not talking about gluttony, but every person has a certain physical need. Some of us get sick if we don't eat 3 meals a day, or you prefer to eat few smaller meals and you eat healthy things. Savita and me always have a beef about this, because I it's not like I don't have a problem. She should do what works for her, but I would rather eat balanced every day than starve myself for 5 days and go and eat a lot of junk on the weekends. I don't see how that is restraint. So and you're human, you're allowed to do that, to indulge. But my point is, why did you call that noble? I don't see anything.
Hey, not every weekend. You know that. Not every weekend.
Not you, but I'm talking to him. Like, what I'm asking him, Savita, is why did he call it noble fasting? It makes the rest of us sound ignoble, which is not the case. Just because I choose to eat 3 meals a day, I was brought up to believe that eat 3 wholesome meals a day, eat loads of vegetables, eat millets, eat ragi, make sure you get all your everything in the right way. I would rather eat healthy, and it's okay if I have a few pounds here and there. Why are we trying to subscribe and put people in this perfect bubble of having this size and not having flab? No, human beings are not meant to be of the same size. Restraint has nothing to do with starving yourself or being a zero size or being a certain.
Priya, sorry, I want to answer this question for
actually, can I,
Srini,
Savita,
if you don't mind.
No, can you please? No, one is I'll let you answer it, but I would want Priya to
respecting people.
Finish your thing. Finish your thing, please. Yeah.
This whole notion is putting pressure on people, unconsciously. Everybody is feeling the necessity to subscribe to this notion. Anybody who's outside of that is sometimes made to feel guilty that they don't have a healthy lifestyle. Everybody has a different physical need. Everybody's body needs different set of nutrition, and everybody doesn't have to look slim.
That is not the intention of. That is not the intention of expressing when we enjoy something or when we experience something. We usually tend to share, saying, "Hey, I experienced this. Hey, I went here, such a place, and I experienced such a thing, or I bought something and it is in good quality." So same with the health system as well. Somebody like I do intermittent fasting. I see the benefit for myself. I'm excited to share that with you. So it doesn't mean that mine is or anybody else is noble or not being noble. It's just
not
the benefit of it. No, not me or anybody. But I'm saying
noble fasting.
Okay.
How does
it, don't get hang on to that one word. That's what I would say. Don't bring all your resistance with one word. Yeah.
It's not resistance. You don't understand. These things have actually started harming people. Normal people who are functioning fine, going about their life, who were like okay with being a little, nobody was body shaming them. In India, especially, okay, like you always had one child who's chubby, one child who's not slim, and then it's okay. You have mean cousins who make jokes about you, but in the end, it's not like as long as this person was active, being able to fulfill all her responsibilities, functional, he or she was not deemed unattractive or unhealthy. There are skinny people who are so miserable and who don't even feel healthy. And everybody is buying into this notion. I see a social problem here. I'm not targeting you or I'm not against people. But what happens is that unintentionally, a lot of pressure is being created. If you don't follow one of these things that are being flouted everywhere, you are made to feel like you're not somehow subscribing to this overall notion of healthy. I do not buy that. I'm actually very upset you called it more noble, Srini.
Actually, no. Actually, I'll get to it. Number one, the point, I think, how should I say this? I think your interpretation, your perception is completely wrong. And the reason why I tell you this, we are talking here about yoga. What is the essence of yoga? To keep your mind in a tranquil state, right? This has nothing to do with the body. The whole thing that you're talking about is transcending the body. Here, you're talking about the dimension on how we want to look, whether it's look slim or thin. In fact, the whole yoga is about getting mastery, transcending the body and this external perception. In fact, one of the pratyahara, perhaps we all need to practice, is to be able to get carried away by the imaginary perception of judging people by how they look. So I think we're missing the essence. So this pratyahara is not about the ketosis diet or this diet or that diet or maintaining a six-pack. That is not the whole point at all. That's completely different. Then it's about how do we bring our mind into the tranquil state? How do we get equanimity? How do you operate from a blissful state? That is what is our ultimate goal. That is what we are actually trying to get to. I think most of the things that we are actually doing right now to a lot of people, right? In today's world, whenever you are stressful, the first thing that we are going to indulge is eating has become a comfort food. So this has become a habit. This was not there before. And we would only eat when we needed to, right? There was like 3 meals and so on and so forth. And then the type of the food that we were also eating was full of prana. You cooked and you eat it and so on and so forth. Now in today's world, the food has become is one of an experience. In fact, it was actually wrongly marketed as this is actually a blissful experience. So everybody thinks that they actually get into a blissful state by consuming food. Or or the other sensory things. You basically, we get sold like, go subscribe to Netflix, go subscribe to Amazon Prime. The more channels that you have, and this is what we are being prescribed or conditioned into the world, is that pratyahara is the trick to actually get happiness. And we are now seeing,
mind if you don't get these notifications. Sometimes it's so irritating, and I'm trying to stop myself. So many LinkedIn notifications, you tend to compulsively going and clicking on it, and those are things I agree with you. We have been overloaded, and
exactly all dimensions. This has nothing to do with the dimension of how do you look. In fact, if you were to actually interpret this correctly, one of the sensory perception that we need to master is, the eyesight, and not get carried over by how you look at the people in the judges, right? So the real dimension of here is where the society.
That we've always been taught that in Indian homes to not attack. We've always been taught that in Indian homes when we grew up, right? To not make a person feel bad because of how they look, or just because you're pretty doesn't make you special if you don't have a good
what the definition of pretty is also, it's like, something that you are clinging onto your sensory perception, right? The prettiness is when you can actually connect to the self. When you connect to the self, you're seeing the self in the drashta within you, and the drashta everything, ekatatva, abhyasa. I mean, that is where we are headed. The thing that we are actually doing is, people, the avidya is actually letting everybody to go seek happiness, or what they think is a joy, in the ice cream, or in the pizza, or in the Netflix movie, or in the touch, or in something. We are attaching our basically, I mean, this is what the mind creates, right? The mind, the system has been created, which is the chatter, the colored mind, where we are seeking our happiness and the external, prosecution of external things. And the pratyahara is like to be able to withdraw, you seeking your happiness from the external pursuit, but rather more anchor, pose yourself on the inward journey. The more you basically, it's like, it has nothing to do. In fact, if somebody is so occupied with, I want to get to whatever the six-pack or whatever the thing, that is also called as an pratyahara, because you are being too greedy, or it's actually called aparigraha, or sorry, parigraha actually, right? Because you're being greedy to accumulate something in the yama niyamas, right? In fact, what I also believe, I mean, I have two wonderful daughters. I mean, this is something that is so close to me. In fact, we the other day, on the Shivratri day, we even talked about the first upavasa in the Chamaka. It starts with Vajaschame, Prasavaschame, Prasiddhischame, Prayatischame. That's what it actually says. We actually seek blessings for giving us the right food and giving us the right nutritious power to be able to digest it, to be able to translate that into the right energy and the prana, that we can actually use it to give us the right buddhi and the right intellect and the right, all the divine qualities, the courage and the shravya, shruti, and which is like right speech and so on and so forth. That is what our consumption needs to enable us to do. But most of the consumption that we are doing, they are actually only building the tamas and rajas. And if we do not become aware of that, and if you try to go shift our attention to, this is about looking, no. It's about do the right consumption. And it depends on the job, I think you rightly said, which is like, depending upon, I mean, most of us are, what are we doing? We are leading a sedentary life, sitting in front of the computer keyboard. So for that, what, I mean, even if you were to do it, for that thing, what is the right dharmic food that you need to consume? What is the right food means? I'm not only talking about the food. It's also about what is the dharmic TV channel that you need to watch? What's the right content that you need to do? What is the right sangha that you want to pursue, right? This is where the pratyahara is actually talking about, which is about how do we get mastery over your sensory perceptions, both external and the internal, so that we are in the optimum prosecution, optimum consumption. That's based on your dharma. If you're actually going and climbing a mountain, you do need to actually consume all the right thing, right? Get the right gear and so on and so forth. So it's all about maintaining the equanimity. But today, unfortunately, like what I said at the beginning, our economic models are driven by consumer, the consumer spending index. It's all driven by how much the societies are consuming. And the ill effects are like, our healthcare is messed up, our mental health is messed up, and our overall relationships is messed up, the more and more people are there. It's all a direct artifact of overconsumption, atyahara. So unless we actually regroup ourselves into starting the process to gain control over consumption and redefine our economy, redefine our communities on what overall well-being means, I don't think we're going to get there. But we are only going to get there when we practice master the other limbs also, unless people have the right foundation on the yama niyamas, right? And then unless people have the right practice on, the yoga, the asana and pranayama. That's why this is a holistic process. It's not, you cannot individually master each one of them. That's why it's a very well synchronized, the holistic yoga system. So my apologies, I think, we got into it. And then coming back to why I called this as noble. Noble is an artifact. Like, for example, when we call as a noble silence, like, I did some art of silence in a silence course. When you call something as noble, what we call is we don't speak, but we also don't use any gestures. That is what is called the noble silence. In fact, what is that other Dhamma thing, or Upasana? When you do the Vipassana, they actually practice noble silence, where you don't communicate not just by the words or speech, but you don't communicate using gestures. Similarly, when somebody is doing a fasting, then there are different levels of fasting that you actually do, right? One is, do you drink lemon water, or do you do other things? When you say noble fasting, to me, the noble fasting is what perhaps people practicing the faith of Islam, during the month of Ramadan, they don't even swallow their own saliva during the fasting. So that is perhaps the highest form of the thing. But what I do not know,
why are we calling it highest? It's extreme. Why does it make it highest? That's my question.
No. Actually, exactly. What I meant to say is, here is the thing. The noble is where you have utmost mastery. Noble is called when you have utmost mastery over your sensory perception. That is what is called the noble. Like, for example, when I'm practicing silence, you may be shutting your voice, but you may have all these thoughts to communicate, or you might be wanting to communicate through gestures. Then you are actually, that is what is called, you're trying to get mastery over the Karmendriyanam, at gyanendriyanam, you don't have that. When you have mastery over both your karma and the jnana, both outward perception and the internal perception, that is when you have full mastery. That is what is called the noble. Okay, it's only in that definition, right? It has nothing to do with, so when we are talking about restraining control over, let's say, this sense, which is like the taste or consumption, because at the end of the day, eating is a direct artifact of the taste or feeling of fullness. If you want to gain control over that, how do you actually do it? Whether it's like, whether it's, you may be not eating anything, but your mind is preoccupied. It's like, hey man, wait until, tomorrow, the midnight, then I would actually eat all this, goat biryani, I think, which is probably what some of the practices actually do. That is not actually the real essence of pratyahara, because you have the thing, but you defer that to a different thing. But when we look at the real yoga system or the Navavan Shatakam, when you are actually gaining control of your taste, you're not looking from both Karmendriyanam and also Gyanendriyanam. You're not even thinking about the food, right? And then that is how you get mastery. And then when you get that mastery, you're actually, in fact, what we discussed, right? Yama is control. Yama is the outward control. Niyama is this. Eventually, all these systems will build you up to achieve samyama, which is like the total control of the mind. When you have the total control of the mind, you can actually go achieve anything that you pursue in this world. That is our ultimate yogic excellence, samyama. We will cover that once we start the antaranga sadhana. This is all about helping our mind so that we can actually be in total control of our mind. When you are in total control of your mind, not getting the control, today our control is taken by external things. But when you get control of your mind, then that's called the microcosm. When you have the control of your microcosm, then you also project the same control over the macrocosm. Then that's how we become Aham Brahmasmi. We will have the total power of the entire cosmos. That's our true potential. That's what yoga sees it. I truly believe that, but it's a process. It's a process. Right?
Ashwini, I have one quick thing to add. Like you mentioned the Ramzan. So in Hindus, we have the Ekadashi and we also have the Nirjala Ekadashi. So when we do the Hindu fasting, I'm giving Ekadashi as one example of fasting, but Nirjala Ekadashi is one particular example of fasting, but there are many such fastings. And in those, we are not supposed to eat after the sunset, first of all. Secondly, in the Nirjala Ekadashi, we are not supposed to drink even one sip of water and the entire day. I mean, those who observe that, they say that, you know, those systems were very useful because they will discourage the cancerous cell to develop in the body, because body is eating its own whatever is the collected cells there, or, you know, the cellular growth will not happen that much. So that is one example. I mean, I'm just saying it's not just in Ramzan that is happening. It happened in our ancient Hindus or whatever you call it. Yeah, it is just an example. But second thing I have in my mind is about
yeah, sorry. Are you done? Sorry.
No. One more thing I wanted to add is, you know, when we're talking about Pratyahara and both kind of Pratyaharas, the sensory as well as the mental, or what do you say, sensory as well as the second is
Karmendriyanam, gyanendriyanam, internal perception.
Yeah. Right? So those are like, when we are talking about our current state of, you know, the society, we are more like in the automation world, like in the automated world, we call Siri and ask what is the temperature outside, right? Or we ask Google that. So we are not even moving anything. We are not even going out. We are not really actually feeling the temperature. What is it heat or it's cold or what is happening? But we will just move our tongue a little bit and we'll get the answer, and that's it. Like we are back to our samadhi state, in other words. We don't have to really feel or do anything about it. So I'm just kind of correlating these things together, and I was trying to see, you know, whether the technology is helpful, that much of technological, because we are sitting whole day and we are not doing really much, you know, physically. And are we reducing our gyanendriyas, or we are reducing karmendriyas, or we are actually getting towards pratyaharas in that way? Or is it really useful, it's fruitful to be dependent on the technology that much? Or is it kind of restricting our actual growth, you know, spiritual growth, you can call it, or mental growth? We are not that active mentally because we are asking Siri, hey, what's the temperature? What's the multiplication of this and this? We are not using my own brain for that purpose. So
I think that's a very good point. In fact, you know, it's very simple. I think, you know, we are being controlled without being we are willingly letting go of our control to the machines around us, right? And what it actually does is we are becoming zombies. I think, you know, if you guys saw that Pixar movie WALL-E, right? You know, that is perhaps, you know, one of the destiny for the human mankind, right? But what it actually doing is we are literally, who are we? We have the full power to be that yogic excellence, to be that entire Brahman, like the drashta, with an infinite power, right? Instead of mastering that through the yogic process, what you're doing is only, why are these machines there? Because they're trying to cater to your comforts. You know, they basically keep your temperature to only about 65 to, you know, whatever the optimal temperature. What you've done is, by only getting yourself comfortable to that, you've literally destroyed our the capability. Now, once you get out of the whatever that optimal temperature that's there, you feel uncomfortable. You cannot even sustain. But that's not what we are made of. We are made of to be in rugged and so on and so forth. So all these missions are, what they're doing is they are literally dumbing us down more and more and more and more to what we now call a samadhi. I think you brought about the comment of samadhi. I think, you know, some people actually equate that to samadhi. I mean, as an example, you might actually watch a movie, and that movie might engross you completely, and then you don't have any other thoughts. You're like totally immersed in that. I mean, that's also called, you know, some kind of a samadhi. But what the samadhi that we do in the world of the yoga is that the samadhi is you invoke with your own control, with your power. In this case, that is being in the control of the external medium. So it's almost like, you know, there is a difference between hypnotism versus samadhi. So you're basically literally hypnotized to get into, somebody else is in control of you. So that movie, in that case, the movie is in control of you. In this new world of the gadgets are taking control of you. So you are actually becoming more and more of our path should be towards samyama, where you get total control of your body and the universe around you. Whereas, you're actually going the other way, which is like, which is like, I don't know what's the negative word of, samyama, but it's like, anti-samyama, literally, right? So that is the path that we are headed. That's a direction that we are headed with this technology. In fact, the book that I read recently, The AI, The Future of the Power, and this guy, Rajiv Malhotra, makes one chapter about AI. There are 5 Kurukshetras, the battlefields that he had. And one of the battle is for the self, our own true potential, the self. And we all have the responsibility to preserve our own the human, the infinite potential. So what that essentially means is, the first step is like what Dr. Sunilji said: have a room inside which is dark, there is no other things, then practice at least being there for a month, for an hour every day, or something like that. I think we can actually start this in small steps. I think that's one of the things that, yeah, go ahead.
So one additional thing here. So when we're talking about, like, in the older times when people used to go and sit in the cave, right? Like munis and rishis, and they will do the samadhi or dhyan there, right? So that is to feel the total avoiding all the other distractions, including the natural distractions. Maybe there's less air, maybe there is not many, like trees are not making any noise, or birds are not around, or whatever it is. So less distractions overall. And the body is in calmness and the mind is totally peaceful. And if some thought comes in their mind, they had the power, but many times they have developed the power to visualize and see what is happening on the other side of the world. So they can see and they can communicate that way. So it is, I'm talking about something which is like, I don't know exactly, but I think that is how they used to see and communicate.
We'll actually talk about that in the Antaranga Sadhana, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. The point here is, sorry, I'm only trying to do this because we are running out of the time. The thing here is, this is not our destiny. In other words, we should not be able to, the only path should not be to surrender ourselves to caves, which is like, how do we be in this real world, be involved in everything, but yet be in the state of vairagya, which is like the Krishna Tattvam, right? Where we are still engaged in this all the world without getting clung on to any one of them, right? There is one Yoga Sutra that we actually talk, Drushani Shravika Vishayava Trushnasya Vashikara Sangya Vairagyam. Vairagyam is when you are able to enjoy what is this there, but not getting clung to it. Drushani Shravika, whatever you're consuming, yes, if you need to eat something, you eat it, but not. One, it builds an impression it builds an impression that you would want to eat. And when you have control over what you're being, consuming, and then without getting stuck to it, I think that is the ultimate expression of life. That's how Krishna operated. That's how everybody operated. Our destiny is not to surrender ourselves into the caves. If that's the only way that you're doing, perhaps you haven't even mastered it, right? And then the next step is, I think, we literally, I think, the simplest aspect of this is, let's preserve our sensory organs. Let's preserve, this is the capabilities that we have. Don't overindulge in them. Don't overstimulate them so that they become incapacitated eventually. I mean, why do so many people are wearing glasses? I mean, I'm sure there must be some genetic stuff too, but I think, we are literally dumbing down our sensory perception by overconsumption. I think let's actually go to more of a balanced thing. And the process to get there is actually reversing the consumption so that we build mastery over the senses. And that prepares us well into the Antaranga Sadhana, which we talk about, which is the Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. And that is what, Surviji, I think perhaps you are referring to, that the saints have built it. The interesting thing is, we all have the potential to build that capability. We can actually build that by living in this world, by enjoying everything there, without actually doing all these things. If you practice the Ashtvangani, I think we all can realize that. So on that note, what I thought I would do is, instead of me saying any of the final thing, maybe I'll let this thing play for one verse of the Nirvana Shatakam, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. Just everybody gently close your eyes. And there is a beautiful lady that sang this, and I'll send I think I must have sent this into the group. It's always very pleasant listening to her. And if you have time, please listen to the entire 7 minutes, and I'll only play from the first verse.
Mano buddhi ahankara citta ninaham na cha shrotra jihve na cha घ्राण नेत्रे न च व्योमभूमिर्न तेजो न वायुः चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूपः शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम्.
Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Everybody, of your palms, cup your eyes to transmit this wonderful knowledge, to give us the right vision, to see the things that they are. And slowly and gently, with a bright smile, open your eyes. What a fantastic and engaging discussion. So I think this is probably, the more people that got involved means perhaps this is what probably we need to master, perhaps, you know, I don't know. But thank you so much for giving the Tuesday evening class, sharing your wonderful thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Thank
Dhanyavad.
you. Yeah, thank you, Shrini.
Thank you, Srini.
Thank you.